need to be a DJ. The only residency you should be worried about is a mortgage. Why turn tables when you could turn the page? You don't need an opener, you just need closure. The only set list you should worry about is at the grocery store. Send this to an adult.
So I have an observation to share. And honestly, I don't know if this is just me, but lately I've been feeling like everyone I know is a DJ. And I live here in New York City, and it's almost become a running joke within my friend group. We'll be at a house party, meet someone new, and within 5 minutes we'll find out, oh, you DJ too? At this point, it's almost expected. A guy in his early 30s, lives in Williamsburg. Duh, of course he DJs. Okay, I also have a confession to make. I DJ too, and not professionally or anything. I consider myself a pretty casual amateur DJ. And yeah, I love electronic music. I go to music festivals. Most of my friends do too. I recognize that I'm in a bit of a bubble. So obviously, I'm gonna know more DJs than the average person. But even accounting for that, the DJ to non-DJ ratio here in New York just feels way off nowadays. And a few weeks ago, I kept seeing these posts pop up on Instagram that said how being a DJ was the #1 dream job in America right now. Seeing these posts made me think, okay, maybe I'm not imagining this. Maybe this wasn't just occurring in my own little bubble. So I dug a little deeper and found a study that Remitly, a financial services company, did. Remitly analyzed Google search data to see what people around the world dreamt of becoming. DJ ranked #1 in the US, Canada, Australia, Ireland, and Namibia, out of all places. One thing I want to highlight in their study is that they don't just focus on traditional job search terms like DJ jobs, but on the more revealing phrasing like how to be a ... and how to become a ... The language used by people still in the dreaming stage. Seeing the map lit up like this was actually kind of eye-opening, because when I was growing up, I don't remember anyone saying that they wanted to become a DJ. People wanted to be doctors, lawyers, athletes, and actors. I personally wanted to become a spy. But DJ, that wasn't really a childhood dream. At some point, DJing went from being more of a niche hobby to one of the most aspirational creative careers you could have. Okay, but here's the thing. People have always loved music. That's not new. So I don't think loving music alone explains why it suddenly feels like everyone wants to become a DJ. There has to be something more going on. And before I get into my theories, it helps to take a super quick look at where DJing actually came from. Because the DJ we think of today honestly didn't really exist for most of history. The term disc jockey was actually coined all the way back in 1935 by radio commentator Walter Winchell to describe radio announcer Martin Block. And back then, DJs weren't performing on festival stages or headlining clubs. They were radio hosts. Their job was pretty simple: play records, introduce songs, maybe throw in a fun fact here and there. In other words, they were more like music curators than performers. Then, in the 1950s and 60s, something really interesting started happening. In Jamaica, people started building these massive sound systems and throwing street parties where hundreds, even thousands of people would gather to dance. The person choosing the records was called the selector, while another person known as the toaster would hype up the crowd by talking, chanting, and improvising over the music, a style that would later influence rap and hip-hop. Suddenly, the job wasn't just picking records anymore. It was reading the crowd, building anticipation, knowing exactly when to drop the next track, and how you kept the energy going. That's really where the idea of the DJ as an entertainer, not just someone playing records, started to take shape. Then in the 1970s, DJs in New York started pushing things even further. Instead of simply playing one record after another, DJs like Francis Grasso became known for seamlessly blending songs together using beat matching, creating one continuous flow of music instead of constant starts and stops. Around that same time, pioneers like DJ Kool Herc began extending the instrumental breaks of funk records at block parties in the Bronx, helping lay out the foundation of hip-hop. A few years later, Grand Wizard Theodore is wildly credited with inventing scratching, after accidentally moving a record back and forth under the needle. Then throughout the late 70s and into the 80s, disco exploded. And if you know me at all, this is probably my favorite era of DJ history. Nightclubs became cultural hotspots, and DJs were becoming the heartbeat of the dance floor. And as disco evolved, so did electronic dance music. In Chicago, DJs like Frankie Knuckles blended disco, soul, and drum machines to create what would become house music. Around the same time in Detroit, artists like Juan Atkins, Derek May, and Kevin Saunderson were pioneering techno with a more futuristic, machine-driven sound. And so much of the music I love today today traces back to what was happening in those clubs. And looking back, I think it's kind of amazing how many genres all trace back to a handful of cities and communities. For decades, DJs mostly existed in the background. You'd find them on the radio, in underground clubs, hauling around crates of vinyls from gig to gig. They were known by people in their local scene, but rarely by the general public. But fast forward to today, DJs are headlining Coachella. They have millions of followers on Instagram. Some of them have become global celebrities, which is honestly kind of wild, because this all started with someone playing records on the radio. Somewhere between those two worlds, DJing completely changed, and I think there are a few reasons why.
So EDM in 2025 is now the most booked genre for US festivals. This study was taken over 10 years and shows a multitude of genres through many different multi-genre festivals and showing EDM becoming more and more dominant. Note that we are not including genre-specific festivals, so no EDC, Rolling Loud, or Stagecoach, for example. The shift to EDM wasn't surprising. In 2015, Coachella had mostly rock and pop artists, with EDM barely making a mention. However, by 2025, there were over 111 EDM artists, over half of Coachella's lineup. The big gap in the middle that you see in the charts is the pandemic, where the festivals were all canceled for a year or two. And festival goer preferences shifted towards high energy, immersive live experiences that provided escape and euphoria.
I actually think the first reason has less to do with DJing and more to do with electronic music itself. Over the past 10 to 15 years, electronic music has gotten really, really big. Now, again, electronic music has always existed. House music, drum and bass, trance, these genres have been around for decades. But somewhere along the way, they stopped feeling niche. They became more mainstream. And I don't mean people just started listening to more electronic music. I mean the entire culture around it got bigger. Calvin Harris made history in 2016 by being the first electronic DJ to headline at Coachella and close out the main stage. Today, artists like Fred Again, Dom Dalla, and John Summit are selling out arenas and headlining some of the biggest festivals in the world. According to the International Music Summit, the global electronic music industry reached a record value of $15.1 billion in 2025, continuing years of steady growth. And you can kind of see this shift everywhere. Boiler Room videos regularly get millions of views. Circle transformed DJ sets into these cinematic experiences filmed on top of mountains, ancient temples, and hot air balloons. I feel like now I have friends flying to Ibiza just to see kind music and planning vacations around going to Tomorrowland. That's changed the way an entire generation experiences live music. When I was growing up, going to concerts was kind of the default. I still remember my very first concert. I was 14 years old, and my dad took me to go see Maroon 5. Good memories. And back then, if someone asked you who your favorite musician was, you'd probably picture someone standing behind a microphone or someone playing the guitar. Those were the artists that we looked up to. Today, that picture feels a little different. Now everyone is going to festivals instead of concerts. And festivals that used to be dominated by bands and pop artists now dedicate a huge portion of their lineups to electronic music. The same IMS report also found that electronic artists now make up about 18% of the lineups across the world's top 100 music festivals, up from 13% in 2021. That slowly changed our idea of what a modern musician can look like. Now when someone says they're flying across the country to go see their favorite artist, there's a good chance that they're talking about a DJ. Someone standing behind a pair of CDJs instead of a microphone. The DJ has become the defining face of modern live music. And the more visible DJs became, the easier it was for people to imagine themselves becoming one. Because I think aspiration usually follows visibility. The more we see someone doing something, the more attainable it starts to feel. But aspiration is only part of the story, because wanting to be a DJ and actually becoming one are two very different things. And that's where my second theory comes in. I think the second reason is accessibility. Over the past couple of decades, the barrier to becoming a DJ has gotten so much lower. Back then, learning how to DJ wasn't exactly casual. You needed turntables, crates and crates of vinyl, and every new song meant buying another record. Today, it's a completely different experience. You can buy an intro-level deck for as low as $189. Your music library lives on a USB stick or your laptop. You can buy tracks online in seconds from places like Beatport or, illegally rip them from YouTube. Instead of digging through record stores for hours. Everything is digital now. Now, don't get me wrong. Whenever I see a DJ pulling up to a gig, rolling their suitcase in full of vinyl, I'm like, whoa, I have mad respect for them. I think learning to DJ on vinyl is just a completely different level of skill. There's no sync button, you're beat matching by ear, and you're physically like handling records. It just feels like much more of a demanding craft. But it's also a reminder of just how much DJing used to require before you could even play your first set. Technology made getting started as a DJ dramatically easier because once the barriers to entry started disappearing, a lot more people could finally give it a try. But I think technology changed something else too. It didn't just change who could become a DJ, it changed where they could perform. For most of DJ history, if you wanted to play in front of people, you needed a club or, a promoter or someone willing to book you. You essentially needed permission. And today that doesn't really feel true anymore. You can DJ at a rooftop party, your friend's birthday, honestly, even your own bedroom. And that's a pretty big shift. Learning to DJ was only half the problem. The other half was actually getting a chance to play in front of people. Now, a lot of that permission has disappeared. You don't have to wait for someone to book you. You can create your own opportunities. I actually wonder if COVID accelerated this or had something to do with accelerating this. I remember watching DJs streaming sets on Twitch from their balconies and kitchens and bedrooms, basically wherever they happen to be. And I wonder if that quietly expanded our idea of what a DJ set could look like and normalized the idea that DJing didn't have to happen inside a nightclub. Now it doesn't feel strange to see someone DJing at a bookstore or a clothing store or a yoga class even. It just feels normal. There are simply a lot more opportunities for people to DJ now. I think the third reason is that DJs started being seen as celebrities. It's now seen as a cool and sexy and lucrative career path to have. DJs are often seen traveling the world, flying on private jets, and overall living very glamorous lives. Take someone like Peggy Gou. Yes, she's an incredible DJ, but she's also a fashion icon. She collaborates with luxury brands. She appears at Fashion Week. She has her own merch brand called Peggy Goods that consistently sells out. There's almost like a cult-like following behind her. People aren't just buying into her music. They're buying into her as a person. John Summit has a similar effect. Sure, people love his music, but they're also following his personality, his jokes, his travels, and now he's big enough to throw his own festival here in New York. It feels like the audience is invested in the person just as much as the DJ set. And that's actually a pretty recent shift. Not every successful DJ has become a celebrity, but the DJs most of us know have. What struck me is that most of us have never really seen the other side of the industry. We're not seeing the DJs grinding away in bars and small clubs every weekend. We're seeing the teeny tiny fraction who made it, the ones living glamorous and high status lives. Not because every DJ lives that way, but because those are the DJs that we're constantly exposed to. And honestly, from the outside looking in, it looks like a pretty amazing life. You get to travel the world, play music you love, meet interesting people, and build a community around your taste. At a certain point, it almost stops feeling like a career, and it starts feeling like an identity. Years ago, you mostly knew DJs through their sets. Now it feels like you know them as people. I also think social media has amplified a lot of this. You watch behind the scenes clips of them traveling, taking you on a house tour of their dope mansion in Jamaica, going on runs and hanging out with friends. And all of these little moments slowly shape how we think about the job. And that's what people end up aspiring to. Not just the act of DJing, but the person they imagine they'll become if they are successful at it, along with the lifestyle they imagine comes with it. Somewhere along the way, people stopped seeing DJing as something you do. They started seeing it as someone you become. Okay, my fourth and final theory is a trend I've been noticing lately. It feels like having good taste has become its own kind of achievement. Not necessarily making something, just finding it and putting people onto it before anyone else does. This idea actually reminded me of something sociologist Pierre Bourdieu wrote decades ago in his book Distinction. The book is all about taste, more specifically, why we like the things we like. Bourdieu argues that our taste isn't just a collection of random personal preferences. It's shaped by our upbringing, our experiences, and the culture around us. And because of that, taste becomes a way we communicate identity. The music we listen to, the clothes we wear, the books we recommend, they don't just reflect what we enjoy. They're all little signals that tell other people who we are. One line from the book really stood out to me. It goes, "Taste classifies, and it classifies the classifier." At first, I wasn't even sure what that meant, but eventually it clicked. The things we choose don't just classify the world around us, they end up classifying us too. And in my opinion, that's even more true today than when he wrote it. The internet has amplified this notion of taste. Today, your taste is public. Your Spotify playlists, your Pinterest boards, your Letterboxd, your Belly lists, even the items on your Google Maps that you have saved. They're all reflections of what you like and who you are. Part of the reason why taste has become so valuable is because we live in a world with almost unlimited choice. Not just with music, but with honestly everything. There are millions of songs, millions of videos, millions of books and podcasts and restaurants to go eat at. The list goes on and on. More than any of us could ever experience in a lifetime. We don't really have an access problem anymore. We have a filtering problem. The challenge isn't finding something to watch, listen to, or read. It's knowing what's actually worth your time. And when everything is available, the people who consistently help you find the good stuff become incredibly valuable. Music researcher Jeremy Wade Morris writes about this in his paper, Curation by Code. Right at the beginning, he states that automated recommendation systems now occupy a central position in the circulation of media and cultural products. That's a pretty academic way of saying something that we've all experienced, that algorithms have increasingly become our tastemakers. Spotify recommends what songs we should listen to, and Netflix recommends what movies we should watch next. In many ways, algorithms have become our default curators, but I think there was an unintended consequence of this. The more algorithms started curating culture for us, the more valuable human taste became. Because an algorithm can recommend what's popular, but it can't replace someone whose judgment you've come to trust. Someone who consistently introduces you to things you never would have found on your own. And when you think about it, that's really what a DJ is. They're not just playing music. They're saying, trust me, I'll take you on a journey. I've got you. I think you're going to like this, and come dance with me for the next hour. Every set is really an argument for their taste. There's a researcher named Sarah Thornton who wrote a book called Club Cultures. In it, she coined the term subcultural capital. Within music scenes, taste and insider knowledge become a form of status. The obscure remix, the unreleased edit, being the first to discover an artist before anyone else does. If you've ever heard someone ask, wait, what's this track? That's subcultural capital in action. Great DJs have always understood this. They don't just play the songs everyone else already knows. They put on a show that you'll be raving about for months and months after. So maybe that's why everyone wants to be a DJ now. Because I don't think people are just drawn to music. I think they're drawn to what DJing represents. The chance to share their taste, to introduce people to something that they'll love and enjoy, and maybe, just maybe, to be recognized as someone with good taste. But there's one thing that I haven't really talked about yet, and it's probably the biggest reality check to everything I've said so far. Technology has absolutely made DJing way more accessible, but it hasn't made it easier to make a living from it. I came across this article in Attack magazine that analyzed the economics of DJing, and one quote really stood out to me. The math is simple. If barriers to entry drop while opportunities remain more or less unchanged, competition intensifies. And that's exactly what's happening. Technology lowered the barriers to entry, but it didn't create thousands of new festival slots, club residencies, or paid bookings. The numbers are actually pretty brutal. Resident Advisor has over 134,000 DJ profiles, but according to Attack Magazine's analysis, only 2,175 of them have 5 or more upcoming gigs. That's just a mere 1.6%. So yes, there are probably more DJs than ever before, but there also isn't enough demand for everyone who wants to do it professionally. Technology made it easier to become a DJ, but it didn't make it easier to build a career as one. And here's the part that made it feel worse. I found this 2025 survey from the Pete Tong Academy that polled 15,000 artists. 61% of emerging DJs said that they believe social media numbers now matter more than musical skill. 62% straight up called the industry a closed club. So it's not that there aren't enough gigs to go around, it's that a lot of the gigs that do exist aren't necessarily going to the best DJs. They're going to the DJs with the biggest following, which is kind of a brutal thing to sit with if you got into this because you love music and not because you wanted to be an influencer. The same Attack Magazine article goes on to say, one of the most interesting developments is how DJs are creating their own opportunities rather than just competing for existing ones. And honestly, that feels true based on what I've seen. Instead of waiting to get booked, people are throwing their own parties, starting their own collectives, and building communities around the music they love. And maybe that's what being a DJ looks like now. Not waiting for opportunities, but creating them instead. So why does everyone want to be a DJ? I don't know if any of the theories I presented paints the full answer or bigger picture, but it's the closest I've gotten to one. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one. I'd love to hear what you think, or if you have another theory as to why everyone suddenly wants to become a DJ, let me know in the comments below. I'll see you in the next one.